The corridors of Eric's academy never truly slept. They were built of smooth metal, glowing softly with pale blue light, and every corner buzzed with voices from across the galaxy. The academy was the pride of the Union, a place where young minds of 100 species came together to learn side by side. For many, the sounds were music, the clicks of insectoid speech, the flowing tones of aquatic students speaking through translators, the deep hum of crystalline beings resonating with every step. But for one student, the sounds were only reminders that he did not belong. His name was Evan Miller, and he was the only human at Eric's academy. He walked quietly, keeping his head down as others towered over him. He was not small by human standards, but compared to the towering reptilian warriors or the broad-shouldered avians, Evan seemed fragile. His skin, soft and pale, lacked the protective scales, shells, or feathers of his peers. His lungs, unassisted by any breathing device, drew in the filtered academy air with quiet effort. To many, he looked like the weakest creature in the halls, and Evan did nothing to change that impression. When classes ended, others stayed in groups, laughing, debating, boasting of their homeworlds. Evan did not. He carried his books, answered questions politely, and retreated to his dorm. He ate his meals quickly, barely tasting them, and always sat at the edge of the dining hall, far from the noise. He was a shadow among stars. The other students whispered when he passed. Not cruelly, not openly, but enough that he heard the words carried in alien tongues. Fragile, strange, alone. Some even said he was only there because the Union felt pity for the humans, those backward creatures from the outer spiral, desperate to prove they had value in the galaxy. Evan never argued. He let them think what they wanted. But deep inside, beneath the calm mask he wore, there was something heavier, something that pressed against his chest each night when he closed his door, a weight of silence no one else could imagine. At first, Evan had tried to be hopeful. The day he stepped into Eric's academy, wearing the dark blue uniform issued to all first years, he thought maybe this was a new beginning. He thought maybe he would make friends here. Maybe he would learn things that gave purpose to the endless ache inside him. But the stares followed him everywhere. The questions. Why are your bones so light? Why does your body bruise so easily? Do humans really sleep for so many hours? Never stopped. To the others, he was a curiosity, a puzzle, a weak species dressed in borrowed dignity. So Evan chose silence. He spoke only when asked. He never boasted of Earth the way others boasted of their homeworlds. When the avians described their endless skies, he nodded politely. When the insectoids bragged about their great underground cities, he smiled, faintly. He never mentioned the forest he once walked, the oceans he once saw, or the skies that had once stretched endless above him, and he never, ever spoke of why he had truly come here. There were small things that set him apart, though no one noticed, at first. The silver chain around his wrist, worn and scratched, which he never removed, not even during combat training. The way he sometimes flinched at the sudden crack of an energy weapon during practice, though he tried to hide it. The quiet moments late at night when the faintest blue light seeped out from under his dorm room door, a glow that flickered like fire and then faded. Some students wondered. Most ignored it. And Evan kept his secret safe, holding it tight, because it was all he had left. To the academy, he was just a human. To himself, he was something far more fragile, something barely holding together. Yet even in his silence, even in his retreat from others, he carried something extraordinary. He carried memory. He carried the truth of a world that no longer had a voice. And though no one knew it yet, though no alien at Eric's academy could see past the quiet mask of the strange human boy, Evan Miller carried the entire weight of humanity inside him. And that weight was breaking him slowly, piece by piece. Evan's life at Eric's academy was quiet, almost painfully so, until Zerath arrived in his life. Zerath was impossible to ignore. Towering above most students, his body was covered in glimmering plates that reflected light like broken mirrors. His 6 arms moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid, and his many eyes could track motion from every angle. To many, he was intimidating. To Evan, he was curious. Zerath had been assigned as Evan's lab partner in the Academy's advanced biology class. Unlike the other students who barely tolerated Evan, Zerath seemed genuinely interested. He didn't ask the usual pointed questions about human weakness or fragility. Instead, he asked things that made Evan pause. Questions about human thought, human memory, human feelings. At first, Evan was suspicious. He had learned long ago that aliens rarely asked questions without a purpose. Curiosity often hid judgment, and judgment was easier to endure than pity. But Zerath's eyes, so many, and so clear, did not carry mockery. They carried something else, interest and maybe even respect. The first few weeks were awkward. In the lab, Evan worked silently, following instructions to the letter, while Zerath moved around him, observing carefully. Sometimes Zerath would tilt his head and make soft clicking sounds, the alien equivalent of a human smile. Other times he would pause mid-task, apparently lost in thought, and Evan found himself studying Zerath's movements, trying to understand the patterns of an alien mind. One evening, as the academy dimmed for rest, Zerath noticed Evan lingering in the hall. The human's eyes darted around nervously and his shoulders were tense. He clutched his bag close as if it were a shield. The glow from the windows in the distant towers reflected softly on his pale skin. Zerath, intrigued, followed him quietly. He watched Evan enter his dormitory, closed the door gently behind him, and then pause. A faint blue light seeped from under the doorframe, flickering like a candle in a dark room. Zerath froze, unsure what he was witnessing. No human should have such a glow, should they? The next day, curiosity became impossible to resist. Zerath had never disobeyed academy rules before, but today, the temptation was too strong. As Evan left the dorm for classes, Zerath's claw brushed the handle of the door. It turned smoothly. The door opened with a quiet click. Inside, the room was unlike any dormitory Zerath had seen. There were no posters of galactic heroes or schematics of starships. Instead, the space was sparse, almost bare, except for stacks of photographs, scattered papers, and small personal items. But what made Zerath pause was Evan himself. He was kneeling on the floor, trembling with his head bowed. His hands clutched a piece of fabric, a strip of cloth scorched and frayed. Around him were photographs of Earth, cities shattered, forests burning, oceans blackened. In some pictures, tiny human figures were barely visible, fleeing or crying. In others, buildings had collapsed, smoke and fire curling into the sky. Zerath's many eyes widened. He had studied countless worlds in the Academy's archives, but he had never seen anything like this. He had seen war, yes, but this was annihilation. Evan's head lifted slowly. His eyes, pale and glassy, met Zerath's for the first time. There was no anger, no embarrassment, only raw, unfiltered pain. He did not speak at first. The room seemed to shrink around them, the hum of the dormitory fading into silence. "My world is gone," Evan whispered finally. His voice was soft, cracked, fragile. "The war, the fires, the cities, everything I knew, it's gone. I'm not here to represent humans, Zerath. I'm here because I'm the only one left." The words landed like falling stones. Zerath, who had never been speechless in his life, did not know what to say. The glow of his eyes dimmed slightly as he processed the weight of Evan's confession. The human before him was not weak. He was carrying the entire memory of a lost species, and it was almost too much to bear. For a long moment, they both simply existed in the room. The photographs, the torn cloth, the quiet light, it all hung between them like a fragile bridge. Zerath realized something profound. This human, so small, so seemingly fragile, had survived horrors that Zerath could barely imagine. And yet, he had come here to Eric's academy, alone, unarmed, carrying hope as his only shield. Zirath understood in that silent, impossible moment that strength was not measured by size or weapons or shining armor. Strength could be something quiet, hidden, heavy, and still unbroken. And that night, as Evan carefully replaced the photographs in neat piles, Zirath knew their lives had changed forever. The next morning, the academy buzzed with its usual chaos. Aliens of every shape and size hurried through the halls, carrying hollow tablets, energy pens, and experimental devices. The chatter was loud, metallic, liquid, and musical all at once. Yet in the middle of the noise, Evan moved like a shadow, unnoticed as usual. Zirath, however, could not let the memory of last night fade. Every time he glanced at the empty dorm corridor, he felt a pull, a curiosity stronger than any rule or protocol. What had Evan been holding? What had haunted him so deeply? As the day wore on, Zirath's thoughts grew restless. By evening, he found himself walking past Evan's door again. It was quiet now. The other students were in their rooms, studying or playing holo games. For some reason, Zirath's claw reached for the handle before his mind could protest. The door clicked open softly, revealing the room inside. Zirath froze immediately. Inside, Evan was kneeling on the floor once more. His back was straight, but his shoulders trembled under the weight of something invisible, heavy enough to bend his very posture. The small room, dimly lit by the soft blue glow emanating from the desk lamp, was filled with memories, carefully arranged, yet chaotic in their sheer volume. Photographs of Earth covered every flat surface, city skylines reduced to rubble, forests scorched to ash, oceans darkened by unknown poison. In the center of the room, Evan held a piece of fabric in his hands. It was old, worn, burned along one edge, and it carried a faint smell of smoke and earth. Zirath's many eyes moved slowly over the room, trying to take it all in without frightening the human. He had studied devastation in simulations, read reports of wars and planetary destruction, but none of it felt real until now. This was not a report, not a lesson. This was living grief. Evan lifted his head slowly, his pale eyes meeting Zirath's. There was no anger, no embarrassment, no fear, only pain. A deep, unyielding pain that weighed down the air around him. "My world is gone," Evan whispered. The words were soft, yet carried the force of a falling mountain. Everything I knew. It's gone. My family, my home, my people. He paused, swallowing hard. I am the only one left. Zirath, who had never known silence to feel so heavy, simply stayed still. He did not move. He did not speak. He could only watch as the human knelt among fragments of a world that no longer existed. The room smelled faintly of smoke and ash from the distant past. Zirath noticed small things that made his heart ache. A child's drawing of a sun, a tiny house with a stick figure family, scorched but still visible on the paper, a cracked photograph of a laughing man holding a small human child, a burnt journal with pages sticking together. Each item was a story, a memory, a life erased. And here, in the small dorm room of a galaxy far from Earth, Evan carried them all. Zirath's. Many hands twitched with a desire to help. But what could he do? He could not repair the past, could not bring back what had been lost. He could only witness, and perhaps in the quietest way possible, honor it. Evan's voice broke the silence. Again, I was told to hide this, to act like humans were strong, like we survived everything, but that was a lie. The truth is unbearable, and every day, I pretend. He looked at Zirath then, for the first time allowing his mask to slip entirely. I cannot pretend anymore. For a moment, the two of them existed in a strange, shared space. The academy beyond the door, with its noise and rules and expectations, did not exist. There was only Evan kneeling in grief and Zirath standing silently, absorbing the reality of what it meant to be human. Then Zerath stepped forward, slowly, carefully, until he was beside the human. He did not speak. He simply placed one of his many hands gently on Evan's shoulder. The touch was light, but it carried more warmth than any energy shield, more comfort than any words could express. Evan flinched at first, then leaned slightly into the contact, as if realizing that, for the first time in years, he was not entirely alone. The weight of the world he carried, the entire memory of a lost species, was not lessened, but it was shared, even if only slightly. For Zerath, that moment changed everything. He had come to see a quiet, fragile human. What he saw now was someone unimaginable, someone broken, yes, but unbowed, someone carrying grief so vast it could crush a star, yet still moving forward. Evan did not smile. He did not speak. He only let the tears fall silently as Zerath remained beside him, an unspoken promise that at least this one alien understood. And in that quiet dorm room, among the blue glow, the photographs, and the scars of Earth, a bond formed, a fragile, fragile bond, but real. Something new had begun. The next few days at Eric's academy passed in a strange blur for Evan. He attended classes, completed assignments, and moved through the halls as if nothing had changed. To his classmates, he remained the quiet, fragile human, polite, reserved, unassuming. But inside, something had shifted. The weight of the memories he carried, the photographs, the burned fragments of his world, the endless images of destruction, pressed down more heavily than ever. Each night when he closed his door, he felt the ache return, stronger, sharper. And each night he dreaded being alone with it. Zerath noticed the change immediately. The alien's many eyes followed Evan through the halls, not with curiosity this time, but with concern. He observed the subtle tremor in Evan's hands as he carried his books, the way he avoided eye contact, the silent sighs that escaped him when no one was watching. Finally, Zerath decided he could not wait any longer. After classes, he followed Evan to his dorm room again, staying a respectful distance behind. When Evan entered and shut the door, Zerath paused at the threshold, unsure whether to knock or simply step inside. His instincts screamed caution, but something deeper, an urge to understand, to connect, pushed him forward. The door creaked softly as it opened. Inside, Evan was hunched over his desk, carefully arranging photographs into neat stacks. Each image was a fragment of a past that seemed almost impossible to believe. Cities leveled by firestorms, oceans choked with black sludge, forests reduced to ash. And among them, human faces, family, friends, strangers, caught in moments of fear, loss, or sorrow. Zerath's eyes widened as he took it all in. He had read history reports, seen simulations, and studied human resilience, but nothing compared to this. Nothing could have prepared him for the sheer magnitude of loss carried in this tiny, pale human. Evan did not look up. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried with it the full force of his pain. I was told to act like humans survived everything, like we were strong, like nothing could break us, but that was a lie. His hands trembled as he picked up a photograph of a smiling woman and child. This was my mother. This was my brother. And they didn't survive. He paused, pressing the photo to his chest, as if holding it close could bring it back. I am the only one left. I am all that remains of a world you will never see, a planet you will never know, and every day I walk among others pretending I am just another student, just another weak human. When inside, I am dying. Zerath took a slow step forward. The alien had never felt such raw emotion before, such vulnerability. In his many years of training, he had learned to control his instincts, to suppress reactions, to maintain composure. But now, standing in Evan's dorm, he could not look away. You carry more than anyone being should, Zerath said finally, his voice soft, reverent. The universe would bend under such weight, yet you walk forward. Evan's shoulders shook. He did not cry often in front of others, but here, in the quiet glow of his room, he could no longer contain it. Tears spilled down his pale cheeks, hot and unrelenting. He pressed his face into his hands, trembling as the memories surged through him. "I try to be strong," he whispered, "but I am so tired. I can't pretend anymore. Every night I see them. I see the fire. I see the people I love burned, drowning, screaming. And I survived." His voice broke completely, and the room filled with the heavy, unspoken truth of survival. Zirath moved closer, careful not to crowd him. He extended one hand, letting it hover above Evan's shoulder without touching, offering silent support. "You are not weak," Zirath said. "Strength is not only in what you can destroy or conquer. Strength is in what you endure and what you carry, in the courage to keep walking when the world has ended." Evan looked up, his eyes red and swollen, and met Zirath's many gaze-filled eyes. For the first time in years, he did not feel completely alone. For the first time, he allowed someone else to bear witness to his pain, to his truth. The room was silent for a long while, except for the soft hum of the academy outside. Between the photographs, the scorched cloth, and the glowing blue light, a fragile understanding formed. A quiet acknowledgement that Evan's suffering was immense, but he did not have to face it entirely alone. And in that room, surrounded by the remnants of a lost world, Evan began to understand something he had never known before. That being human was not about surviving unbroken. It was about carrying your truth no matter how heavy and still moving forward. Zirath remained by his side, not speaking, not judging, only witnessing. And in that quiet companionship, Evan realized that perhaps, just perhaps, there could be hope beyond the memories of fire and loss, because even in the darkest grief, someone could see your strength, and that could be enough to keep walking. The days after Zirath's quiet presence in his dorm room were the first in a long time that Evan did not feel completely invisible, yet the weight of his memories did not ease. It had grown heavier, as if acknowledging someone else could somehow make it more real. He tried to continue attending classes, studying, and completing assignments, but the ache inside him remained, constant and insistent. He remembered every detail of the last days on Earth. The heat of the fires that swallowed cities, the sharp, acrid smell of smoke that clawed at lungs too young to know fear, the trembling of people running and screaming. He remembered the sound of buildings collapsing, the cries of friends and strangers alike. And he remembered standing amidst it all, unable to save anyone, unable to stop the fire that consumed everything. Evan's chain, the silver link around his wrist, had been the last gift his mother had given him, a reminder of home, of love, of what he had lost. Now even that felt like a fragile thread holding him to the world. He touched it constantly, as if the metal could anchor him, could remind him he had survived, that he had a purpose, even when the world had ended. Zirath watched from a distance at first, careful not to intrude. But day after day he noticed subtle changes in Evan, small tremors in his hands, faint lines around his eyes, moments when the human seemed to disappear into his own thoughts. Zirath did not understand all the human emotions, but he understood enough to know that this was not simple exhaustion. This was grief. A grief so heavy, it could crush bones if carried alone. One evening, Zirath followed Evan to the observation deck of the academy. Stars stretched infinitely in every direction, cold and beautiful. The human leaned on the railing, staring out at the void, silent. Zirath approached slowly. "You carry more than any being should," he said softly, breaking the silence. "Even the strongest warriors cannot hold what you hold every day." Evan did not answer at first. His eyes reflected the stars, but they were distant, haunted. "I try," he whispered, voice barely audible. "I try to keep moving. I try to smile, to study, to be normal. But every night it comes back. Every night I see them. My mother, my brother, the streets of Earth burning, the screams, the silence that followed." He let out a long breath as if exhaling the weight of centuries. I thought coming here would help me forget. That learning, that studying, that pretending to be a student, it would make the pain smaller. But it doesn't. It never does. Zerath stayed beside him, silent. His many eyes regarded Evan with careful empathy, an alien expression of understanding. He had never seen such resilience before. Not in warriors, not in generals, not in beings who had survived planetary wars. But here, kneeling beside the human grief, he saw a strength that defied logic. "You survived," Zerath said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "You are still here. You carry the memory of a world no one else can see. And yet you walk forward. That is strength beyond measure. That is humanity." Evan turned to him, his face streaked with dried tears. He looked small, fragile, almost broken. But in his eyes burned a quiet fire. "Humanity," he whispered. "I'm just the last one left. That doesn't feel like strength. That feels like failure." Zerath reached out, lightly touching Evan's shoulder. It was not a human gesture, but it was kind. "No," he said firmly. "It is not failure. You are proof. Proof that even in the face of complete destruction, life persists. Hope persists. That is not weakness. That is the greatest strength in the universe." Evan felt something he had not felt in years. Recognition. Not pity. Not curiosity. Recognition. For the first time, someone understood. Not the labels, not the textbooks, not the lectures, but the truth he carried. The weight of an entire species' memory, compressed into a single fragile body and yet still standing. That night, Evan returned to his dorm room, but he did not feel the same emptiness. He looked at the photographs, the scorched fabrics, the reminders of what was lost, and allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not because the pain was gone, it never would be, but because he had been seen, truly seen, and someone had honored his burden. Zerath had reminded him of something crucial. Strength was not measured in survival alone. Strength was measured in endurance, in the courage to continue even when the world had ended, in the willingness to carry grief without surrendering to it. Evan pressed the silver chain around his wrist. He looked out the window at the stars, endless and cold, but now full of quiet possibility. The human species might be gone, but he, Evan Miller, still walked among the stars. And that was enough for now to give hope, because even in loneliness, even in despair, even in the shadow of a lost world, the human spirit endured. And that endurance, fragile but unbroken, was more powerful than anything Zerath had ever witnessed. The quiet in Evan's dorm room that night was different. It was not the usual oppressive stillness that had followed him for months. It was a space where grief and understanding coexisted, where memory could be honored without suffocating him. Zerath remained nearby, standing silently, his presence a steady anchor in the sea of pain Evan carried. For a long moment, neither spoke. Evan stared at the photographs spread across the floor, the burnt buildings, the blackened oceans, the tiny human figures frozen in fear and loss. His hand shook slightly as he picked up a photo of his mother, her smile bright against the smoke-stained background. "I try not to think about it," Evan whispered. "Some nights I succeed, but other nights, it comes back. Every sound, every scream, every face, and I feel like I'm drowning all over again." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to survive this, how to carry it." Zerath moved closer, careful to respect the fragile space Evan had created around himself. "You are surviving," he said, his voice quiet, steady, without judgment. "You have carried this weight alone for longer than any being should. And, yet, you are still here. That is not weakness. That is strength." Evan looked at him, his pale eyes wide, as if he had never considered the possibility. "Strength," he repeated. "I feel broken. I feel empty. How can this pain be strength?" Zerath crouched slightly, lowering his many eyes to meet Evan's gaze. Strength is not measured by the absence of pain or by victory in battle. Strength is measured by endurance, by the courage to move forward when the world has fallen apart, by the ability to carry the memory of everything lost and still choose to exist. Evan's lips trembled. He clutched the photograph closer to his chest. I am just one human, alone. How can one person matter? Zirath's voice was gentle, firm, almost reverent. You are proof. Proof that life endures, that even when everything is gone, someone can still walk forward. That is the greatest story a being can tell. That is humanity. The words sank into Evan slowly, like seeds planted in dry soil. He allowed himself to breathe more deeply, to feel the first flicker of something he had thought lost forever: hope. He looked around at the photos, at the charred memories of Earth, and realized that they were not just reminders of loss. They were evidence. Evidence that life had existed, that love had existed, that humans had lived, laughed, and dreamed. You really think so? Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zirath nodded. I have seen warriors and kings, generals and philosophers. I have seen those who conquered worlds and those who shattered planets. None of them carry what you carry. None of them endure with the weight of an entire species in their heart. That is what makes you strong. That is what makes you human. For the first time, Evan did not flinch. He let his hands fall from the photograph. He let the tears come freely, not from fear or despair, but from release. His chest heaved, and with every sob he felt a fraction of the burden lighten. Zirath remained beside him, silent, steady, a reminder that he was not entirely alone. Hours passed. The room, once filled with shadows, now felt warmer, safer. Evan looked out the window at the stars, distant and cold, but beautiful in their quiet endurance. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future, not one that replaced the past, but one that honored it, carried it, and still moved forward. I don't know if I can ever stop missing them, Evan said quietly, but maybe I don't have to face it alone anymore. Zirath's hand hovered briefly over Evan's shoulder, a silent affirmation of understanding and support. You do not have to, he said. Not ever. Your strength will guide you, and you will not walk this path alone. Not anymore. Evan nodded slowly. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he allowed himself to hope. The weight of grief was still there, yes, but it was tempered by recognition, by connection, by the knowledge that someone understood. And in that quiet dorm room, among the photographs, the scorched fragments, and the soft glow of the lamp, Evan Miller began to see something he had thought impossible, that even in loss, even in despair, life could endure. Humanity could endure. And in the heart of one fragile human, the entire species' courage lived on. That night, Evan did not feel entirely broken. He felt seen. He felt understood. He felt the first stirrings of strength that came not from denial, not from pretense, but from truth. And that was enough to keep walking.